Welcome to the Family Office Success Podcast, where we explore the strategies, the insights, and the best practices that help families and their advisors build and manage successful family offices. I am your host, Christi Van Rite, and each episode, we dive into the key elements of running a family office. Whether you're a family looking to structure your advisory team for long-term success, or you're a professional managing the complexities of a multi-generational enterprise. From financial oversight and operational efficiency to selecting the right advisors and creating a lasting legacy, this podcast is here to provide practical guidance and expert perspectives. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Family Office Success Podcast, where we talk all things family office. Today's conversation is continuing on our philanthropy theme for this podcast series. And we're talking to Josh Chadajo with JEC Philanthropy. And the reason I think this conversation fits in really nicely with this series is because Josh has a little bit of a different way of thinking about philanthropy and working with families and getting to the why versus the specific hows. All of these things are important. They all flow together and provide a well-rounded and structured way to program funds to really do what they want to do. Josh's approach is just a little bit different. So I hope you enjoy today's conversation. And if you do, listen to the end and we will get you all of the contact information to get in touch with Josh. So with that, I would like to welcome Josh Chadajo with JEC Philanthropy. Josh, welcome. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I'm excited for our conversation.
Me too. So give us a little bit of background about yourself, how you got to this place, and what is JEC Philanthropy?
Sure. So I grew up in the Boston area, went to college, and started working at a nonprofit organization. And I realized that people are working in nonprofit very often because they're passionate about the cause, but it doesn't mean they actually know how to run the place. In many ways, it's like a business, arguably harder than running a business because usually you don't have the same financial levers that you do to compensate employees, among other issues. So I got an MBA thinking that I would take those skills and then come back into the nonprofit sector, which I did and ended up running two organizations for about 20 years. And during that time, working heavily with donors, I realized that most donors don't have anyone to talk to about their philanthropy. If you have a charitable foundation with professional staff, then you're covered. And if you want tax advice in terms of your gift, you probably have that or access to that. If you have questions about timing for making a gift from a cash perspective or how much is available for you to give right now, you also have access to that through your wealth manager. But no one's helping you figure out, what do I want to accomplish with my philanthropy? What is meaningful to me? And all the issues surrounding that. And I came to that. First, I came to it in two different ways. First, I noticed that many donors didn't even have the basics. So someone would say to me, I'm a donor to your organization. And I would think, you gave $500 12 years ago. That doesn't make you a donor to this organization. And then the next person would say, what did I give last year? $5,000? And I was thinking, no, you gave $25,000. So here, these are just factual pieces of information, pretty basic, that they didn't know. And then I took a step back and I realized, wait a minute, what's happening here? You're taking people who are busy. They're probably distracted. They might be disorganized. The more wealth they have, the more people probably know they have that wealth. And therefore, they're getting inundated with requests. So they're playing defense instead of offense. They're thinking about what other people want, not what they want. And they don't want to make a mistake. And they don't want to be taken advantage of. And this is a horrible recipe to encourage people to make gifts. And on the off chance that they fight through all that and they do make a nice gift, their quote unquote reward is that 20 other organizations show up immediately and say, hey, what about us? We also want a gift. There's got to be a better way. And so I formed JEC Philanthropy to be the donor's partner with all things connected to their philanthropy.
Love that. And I will echo that most of the families, when they come to us, a lot of our families are charitably minded, which just fills my heart. And I love that. I think we attract those families that are philanthropic minded. But most families, when they come, they really don't know how much they're giving. And there's a lot of reasons, a lot of really important reasons to know who you're giving to and how much you're giving to that organization, from not only from your perspective, from why are we giving, how are we giving, just making decisions based on what's actually important to the family. But it's also really important for tax purposes and getting donor letters back. So we spend a lot of time with our families getting that foundational organization in place that has quite a bit to do with their philanthropy. So I appreciate that you mentioned how important it is to be organized in your giving and know where you're giving and how much you're giving.
Think about how hard nonprofits work for every dollar. And for about 18 of those 20 years, I was the executive director here in North America for an organization called the Pardes Institute of Jewish Studies. And there was a woman who had made a pledge of $500,000. Year one, she sends in $200,000. Great. Year two, she sends in $200,000. Great. Year three, she sends in another $200,000. So that's $600,000 on a $500,000 pledge. And so we get in touch with her and say, listen, we're so grateful for your support. We just want you to know that you pledged this and this is what you paid. And her response was, nah, just keep it. And this was someone we were thrilled, right?
Of course.
Here's someone who gave an extra $100,000. Was she going to miss it? No. Was it the best use of her money? I don't know. What are her priorities? Why is she supporting us? What is she hoping to accomplish? All these things. Yes, and you know what? Maybe if we didn't say anything, we'd keep getting $200,000 checks. I don't know. But this organization is really key, just as it is with every other area of your life.
What makes how you work with families different from your perspective?
It's hard to know exactly what other folks are doing, but what I do is I really help people figure out what they want to accomplish. What do you want to accomplish with your philanthropy? And if you already know, then we take a look and see, are you actually accomplishing it? We do a sort of philanthropic audit where we go through every gift that a client has made over the last usually 3 years, although this could vary, and they tell me why they made each gift. And in the end, when you add up all the gifts they've made and the reasons they've made each gift, you can see how much they supported each giving priority. And very often people think, oh, I have 3 priorities and I support them each equally. When in reality, your first priority, you support 80%. And your second priority, you support maybe 15%. And your third priority, you don't support at all. And then there are a few other random gifts thrown in there. And this, or sometimes you can find out, oh, I gave 20% of my money here last year. The year before, I only gave 5% of my money. And so the question here is, it's not a matter of judgment. It's a question of, are you actually giving the money where you want to give the money? And then, so once we see what's really happening and we compare that to what they want to happen, then we figure out a plan for going forward. And for me, I've seen that when people know what they want to accomplish and then know they're accomplishing it, then they enjoy it more. And when they enjoy it more, then they give more. And when they give more, then they accomplish more and really create this virtuous cycle. And that involves being organized, as we talked about, but really putting these giving priorities under a microscope and really figuring out, what are you trying to accomplish? And also, if you have 19 giving priorities, guess what? You don't have any giving priorities.
Sure.
And really try to make this manageable. I tell clients all the time, you do the fun stuff, I'll do everything else. And that varies from client to client. What one person loves, the other person hates, vice versa.
You mentioned whenever we were chatting a couple of weeks ago, this concept of the fractional executive director. And that language really resonated with me from a family perspective and from the family office side, because I say we run the business of the family so the family can go and run the family business. That fractional, and effectively, we are a fractional chief operating officer or chief of staff for a family. And so that's probably why that resonated with me so much. But the idea that a family would have somebody who is working as part of the team, right? Like it takes all of us it takes a village to raise kids. It takes a village to support a family in the direction that they want to go. And so having a philanthropic advisor acting more like an executive director for the philanthropy for the family just really caught my attention. The idea that the family says, here's what we want to give and here's our priorities. And then someone like our teams are working together to say, okay, this is where you gave. And then you're coming back and saying, it's not really what you said you wanted to do. Where should we tweak this year? Like, okay, let's look at cash flow over here. And you're looking at truly matching their priorities. I thought that was a really interesting concept that I hadn't heard before, that I really appreciated, this fractional executive director for a family.
I think a lot of people haven't thought about, I can have someone who's running my philanthropy for me, but I don't need a full-time executive director. And actually, I don't even need a foundation, right? It doesn't matter where the money comes from. It could be a foundation, an owner advised fund, current assets, your estate. But really this idea that you have an advisor that's looking out for you and looking out for your interests when it comes to philanthropy. When people say, what areas do you focus on? What are you interested in giving? I always tell clients, whatever you're interested, that's my interest. That's what I care about. I want to make sure that you are funding what's meaningful to you, and that, oh, you've given $150,000 a year to this organization for the last 3 years. You skipped last year. Did you do that on purpose? This is when we're doing the assessment. Or if we're working, you're about to skip this year. Or you've been talking about giving more in this area. You want to fund 20%. I think you just alluded to this. You're at 2% right now, and we're in the fourth quarter. And so is there a reason? Did you want to reallocate? This just happened with a client. We talked about adjusting. We put together targets for each of his giving priorities. And this isn't a plan that you just stick on a shelf and revisit once a year or once every 5 years, once every 10 years. It's a living, breathing strategy. And some things change for him. He said, you know what, I'm not as interested in this priority right now. So let's allocate or reallocate some of the funds we put in that area and move them into my first priority. I want to emphasize or invest a little more in that this year. And just to go back to this idea that you can get help with your philanthropy is not commonplace or as well understood by most people, which is interesting. Andrew Carnegie, the industrialist and philanthropist, said it's harder to give away money well than it is to earn it. Okay, so if he is saying that, right, then I think the rest of us could probably follow in his footsteps in that sense. And in the same way that most people have a financial advisor to direct their financial investments, right, it's worth considering whether having a philanthropic advisor would make sense for you to help you with your philanthropic investments.
Agreed. I'd like to re-emphasize something that I tell our families all the time, which is there are very few things that an advisor is going to build or handle for you or advise you on that are static. You know, you think about a financial plan, or you think about a philanthropic plan, or you think about just your overall family planning. Very few things do you do once and then put on the shelf and then take the book down once a year and you're like, oh, did we do it? Did we not do it? There's not a piece of the puzzle and that I've come across that you would plan and then say, okay, it's done. Now I'm going to put it on the shelf and we'll revisit it in a year or 2 years and just assume that it's going to work along the way, because when you assume, it never works along the way.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. And I think the key here is having advisors that do either the hard work or spend the time that you don't want to do it. And just because it shouldn't sit on a shelf once the whole year doesn't mean you need to be the one, right, pulling it down and reviewing it, that you bring in help for things either you can't do, or maybe you're not comfortable doing, or maybe you just don't want to do because you have other things to do with your time. And I think you're 100% right.
So let's pull on that thread for just a second. What are the kinds of things that you as a philanthropic advisor working directly with a family are doing to help this family put this plan into place? What are those tasks? What are those timelines that you're working through and taking off of their plate?
So I'll give you a few different examples. I think that's probably the best way. Someone is working on their will. They have no heirs, and they say, I want to leave my money to, and then name a cause. which is beautiful. And at the same time, you can't write a check to animals or a check to the elderly, right? You need to be a little bit more specific. So we then take a step back. Usually when someone says this, they have a picture in their head, but they're not giving you the picture. So pulling that picture out, working with them to figure out, why do you want to do that? What do you mean? What do you see when you imagine yourself doing that? And spend a lot of time painting that picture and understanding the importance of that. And then figuring out, okay, so where should that money go? What organization or organizations will help you fulfill your charitable intent? And then coming up with language that says, this is what I want, this is why, and this is what I don't want. And all of that's really important, because if that organization that you're leaving money to no longer exists, then what's going to happen? And sometimes you'll see language that says, give the money to a comparable organization. If you're funding literacy efforts for high school kids in Miami, Florida, what is comparable? Literacy, high school kids, or Miami, right? So it's not enough, right? So that's sort of one example. Another example could be someone, the tax advisor comes to them and says, look, you got to give away X number of dollars over the next 3 years because for tax reasons, you got to do it. And the person says, great, I'm happy to, but how do I do it? And so in this case, I'll work with the client and we'll start at the beginning. What's important to you? Again, similar, not exactly the same, but what's important to you? Why is it important to you? What do you want to accomplish? What's your risk profile? Are you interested in blue chip organizations? They've been around for 50 years. They're going to be around for the next 50. You want to fund startup nonprofits that maybe it's going to be a little riskier, but they have a different approach. Do you have geographic preferences? Do you want your name on a building? Do you want to be anonymous? Do you want to give to programs? All of the things with this, and then we'll develop a profile both for the organizations and for the kind of gifts. And then I'll go out drawing on my network and my relationships to find organizations that meet the client's interests. And then once that's done, putting together grant agreements, following up with the organizations, monitoring them in partnership with them to make sure that they're really accomplishing what the donor is hoping. And if not, figure out, well, can we be helpful in helping you accomplish that in a better and different way? And then I guess the last example I'll give is, and I alluded to this earlier, helping figure out what are the priorities, how much do you want to allocate to each of those priorities, and let's see what that means from a budget perspective, and let's figure out when do you want to give to these, and we're going to meet regularly to make those gifts, to make sure they get paid, to see what's left, to evaluate new opportunities as they arise, to adjust as they go forward. And this is more, interestingly, this sort of budgeting sometimes happens with financial advisors that even though they deal with money all day, they want someone to help them do this part of it. I'll just end with a somewhat amusing to me and maybe to them because it was a small gift, but someone told their assistant, send a gift to, and gave the acronym. And it turns out when I saw the gift on the list of their gifts, I thought, why did this guy just give to the engineering association? He's not an engineer. He doesn't have anything to do with engineers. And it turns out when he gave his assistant the acronym, she Googled it and there were 8 different organizations with that acronym. So she picked one and it was the wrong one.
Oh, gosh.
Now, thankfully, it was a small gift, but it might have been a big gift. You never know.
Oh, my goodness. One of the things that I think is also super unique about how you are continuing the work with families directly is this idea that you are staying in touch with those nonprofits, asking the questions. You said you were going to do this. Is this happening? If so, what else can we do to support you? If not, why not? And maybe there's a very valid reason. Maybe something went off the rails and you can ask more questions about that. But then that can inform future donations, either to that specific gifting area inside that nonprofit or to that nonprofit altogether. I think a lot of people just write a check to a nonprofit because maybe it does fall into their, I want to give to children, and this is a children's nonprofit. Check the box, I gave to a children's nonprofit. Versus we're giving to this program or we're giving to this nonprofit as a whole, because you and I both know that those people who work there also have to get paid. You can't always just not fund overhead because overhead has to be paid. Otherwise, there's not a nonprofit. There's a balance there for sure. But this idea that you're actually working with the nonprofits and following up and being a part of that program, I just think is really interesting and a big differentiator for how you're interacting between the families and the nonprofits and the gifts.
I think you said a lot of really great things there. First of all, someone who says, I'm interested in a children's organization and writes the check and checks the box, that's good. Let's not bad, it's
Sure.
good.
Sure.
But what I would say is, and I think you would say, don't settle for good. You can do better. You can do much better. And once you get involved, it becomes so much more meaningful. There's this great story that a client told me last week where he made a big gift to an organization, and the executive director, flew in to thank him, and they had lunch together. And she said, I want you to know this is a really big deal for us. And he said in response, this is a really big deal for us too. And they had a sort of moment, and I could feel it just in him telling me. I said, hey, that sounds like you had a moment. Yeah, we did. And it was, you don't get that if you're just writing the check and that's it. And so when we try to pursue excellence in giving, which is what we should be doing, the same way we're doing that elsewhere. And that means not only writing a check, sometimes with organizations, I'll ask them if I sense there might be an issue. You guys need accounting help? Do you have a bookkeeper that you need? Do you need, because just you meet people, right? We meet people that could be helpful for them because it's not just a matter of delivering the services. It's a matter of having the back end also work. Like you said, overhead is important. We should be focusing on outcome. The goal is not to minimize overhead. The goal is to achieve the success in whatever area where we're working. And if we can be helpful in that area as well, and it's always done in a way of partnership. It's never in the sense of, God, gotcha. See, you said you were going to have 10 people enroll and only 8 did. That's not the right approach. That's not the right approach at all. And I want to say one other thing in terms of working with the donor and the organization. It even starts with the gift. One of the things that we talk to with nonprofit organizations, sometimes should the gift be restricted to a certain area, sometimes not. Sometimes we have a conversation about it, but don't ultimately restrict to that item because we want to give them flexibility. Either we trust the organization or we don't. And if we do, then maybe right now it seems like this is going to be the current need, but it might change. But more importantly, or as importantly, how do you want the gift? Do you want an outright grant? Do you want it to be a challenge grant? If you're trying to increase gifts from a certain level of donor, we're happy to give you a challenge grant if it helps you. And sometimes we can split it. We can give you half the gift can be a grant outright. So you get something today, we're going to put it in the mail, and the other half could be a challenge grant. And in the last, I don't know, month or so, 3 organizations, all 3 different options. One said, yes, give us half as a challenge grant, give us the other half as just an outright grant. Another one said, we'll take the whole thing as a challenge grant. That's going to help us further our goals. And the other one said, heck no, give us the grant. We can't deal with a challenge.
Just not where we're at. Sure.
Yeah. And I respected all 3 of them, right? And each organization has a different capacity to do those things. But this is all about partnership with the donor, partnership with the other advisors, partnership with the nonprofits. That's really key to all of this.
I love it. You mentioned a story to me when we chatted last time about, I want you to tell the story because I think it goes to further the point about the outcomes. And that story was around the young man who graduated from high school. The donor was giving to the high school. I think it was a high school, correct me if I'm wrong, but the ultimate outcome was that this young man was literally graduated and then was short a little bit to go and learn how to be a pilot. And you were like, of course we're going to fund that. Go be the best you could be. That's what we got you here. So tell us that story, because I think a lot of people really do think we gave it here. I'm funding children here, but maybe there's not that longer term pull to watch how those funds made a difference over the years to those kids. So do you mind telling that story?
I'd be delighted to. A client is funding an organization that helps people get through high school and then take the next step. Most of them go to college, some of them go to the military, and some of them have vocational training. And not only do they help them get to that next step, identify the next step and which place is appropriate for them to land, but also to help get them through and help them make sure they complete whatever they're trying to do. And interestingly, because of how the story turned out, my client and I had this conversation about how it's such a shame that you can invest so much in a student and then all of a sudden they almost get to the end and they have no one to turn to, and then it all falls apart. And it's a shame because you've made maybe 90% of the investment needed or more, and then it falls apart. And then, as if this organization somehow was listening to our conversation, which I know they weren't, they send an email to us and say, we want to tell you a story. We've been working with this student since 2016. And in 2020, that's when they first met the student. In 2023, this person got their pilot's license, their personal pilot's license. They ultimately want to be a pilot for Delta. This person worked part-time to earn the money to get that credential. And then they took and passed all the exams to become a commercial pilot. And right when they were at the very end, they were running into a financial issue to pay for this. And they were able to earn and raise some of the money, but they were still short. And this organization, one of the reasons the client liked this organization is because they make sure those students don't get almost all the way to the end and then fall off, and it derails their whole positive career trajectory. So the organization stepped in, and now the pilot, he is a pilot, he's a certified pilot, a licensed pilot in Georgia. Here's the remarkable thing. The amount of money that was needed to save this person's career was $950. We're not talking about $100,000. We're not talking about $25,000. It actually wasn't even $1,000. It's not saying that's not a lot of money in some circumstances, but I think we could all agree, given the time and effort and resources that were used to have the student himself get himself to this point, it would be a shame for that last 950 to have it in there. And what's really beautiful to me is you were talking about the kinds of clients that you attract. The client's response to this was priceless. He said to the organization, look, I'm glad that you were able to help the student and that you are doing what we wanted you to do, which is why we're funding you. But really, all the credit goes to the student. He's the one who did it. And that it was such a selfless and beautiful, and I would even say appropriate response. And of course, he was humble enough to take himself out of that. But everybody's playing a role. He had to provide the funds. The organization had to have that mission and fulfill that mission. And the student put in the hard work, achieved, got to the end, just needed a little push or a little help. And now things are continuing to move along positively.
Yeah. I think that also speaks, though, to the connection, the continuous connection that the family, and that the nonprofit had, for them to connect those dots and come back and say, let us tell you the story. And in that moment, maybe they were actually asking for the $990. I'm quite sure that was that outcome, but they did it in a way, and they did it because you had built the relationship. I would take a guess that if there hadn't been that relationship there, that call might not have gotten made, or it might have gotten made, but it would have landed differently because you weren't as invested in these programs as you and that family are. And I agree. My goodness, what that response from the family was beyond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're right. One of the things we tell recipient organizations is we want to hear from you. We want to know, not in a burdensome way, but we want to know what's happening. We want to know when things go well, and we want to know when things aren't going well, because it can't be that things are going to go well all the time. Okay, so tell us, let us know what's going on. And also the other thing we say, which also might be a little different, is don't use jargon. We want to understand what you're saying, even in our introductory calls. You don't get more points for throwing in bigger words with more syllables. Does what they're saying make sense? Do we understand it? Is there a logic to it? And if we can't, then the relationship probably isn't going to progress. Doesn't mean they're not doing great things, but we
Sure.
really want to understand what they're doing.
So, how do you take a family from I want to give to here's what really matters to me? So then you can go and do amazing things in the world. How do you get a family from want to give to here's what matters?
So it's a series of conversations where I get to know them and they tell me either their life story or a bunch of stories. And sometimes when you're telling it to someone new, they hear things that the person might not even know they're saying or might not even know that they are thinking or that they feel a certain way. And then I ask questions, a lot of questions, almost to the point of being annoying. I try to stop before we get to that point, but really want to understand because a lot of times people say things and because no one questions them on it and they've been saying it for so long, it's obvious to them what they mean. But then when you say, well, what do you mean by that? They pause. Actually, what do I mean by that? And so that can sometimes help inform what we consider as we're crafting the giving priorities and the types of gifts they want to make. And so that's bridging two things. We get all that information, and I'm constantly feeding that back to the to the family. This is what I heard you say. This is what I'm hearing. Is this what you meant by this? Have you thought about this? And it's a back and forth. Again, it's a conversation. It's an ongoing dialogue. And then we get to the point where we understand what's important to them. We understand why it's important to them. And then if it's appropriate, if they've been giving, we take a look at their giving history and see how relevant that is for right now. Maybe we're going to put that aside, or maybe we're going to carve out certain dollars and we're going to treat that as fixed. And now we're going to move forward in looking at this in a whole new way. And then we focus on those priorities and really refine them. So we have almost an investment strategy. And then we use that as a launching point to figure out which organizations and what types of gifts fit where they want to go from here.
So I'm going to take a guess that along the way, you're documenting who we've talked to, why we're thinking, why the family is moving in this direction, why this charity was ultimately chosen, why this program was ultimately chosen. Is that a fair statement to make?
Yes, it's a fair statement to make. And also, going back to the tailored nature of what we do, thinking about how people are going to receive that, how that's going to be meaningful to them when they want to receive it. Hey, you want to receive this a week before we meet, or do you just want to talk about it on the call? It's here. And again, everybody's different and it has to be tailored to what the client's needs are. But documenting this is important and making sure everybody has access to the information. This is one of those situations where the more people who know what's going on and why it's going on, not only is it better now, but our future selves will thank us because a year from now, we're not necessarily all going to remember the conversations we had a year earlier. So we think about our future selves a lot.
Love it. I'm a big fan of documenting everything that reasons we made decisions, how we got to that decision, why we didn't choose other decisions. These are the things that give you context down the road. And as we know, if you are making decisions without context, you're not always giving yourself the best ladder to walk up to make decisions. So as we wrap up our conversation today, Josh, what are some of the practical takeaways for families or advisors as part of this philanthropic journey that you would want them to leave this conversation with today?
I would say a few things. One, don't wait till December 15th to start thinking about your philanthropy, right?
Yes.
Philanthropy is and should be a year-round sport. Okay, so this is the best time to think about it. Taxes are done. Hopefully, this is a good time.
No.
It's always a good time to be thinking about it. Second, don't be on autopilot. Don't be on autopilot. I had someone that I was talking to who the wife's friend's daughter worked at an organization. They started giving. Fast forward, the wife is no longer friends with the woman. The daughter doesn't even work at the organization. And they're not only are they still giving, they increase their gift. Okay, So don't be on autopilot. Okay, that's another one.
Okay.
Think clearly about what your giving priorities are and why. And I would even say, I'll quickly say there's an exercise that we do that helps people capture what their approach to giving is and why, what their giving priorities are and why, who the major recipients are and why, and then what you want to have happen when you're no longer around, whether it's your kids or your trustees or someone else. The one thing that we can guarantee is that they will not know by osmosis. And if you don't write it
That's
down and
right.
explain why, nobody's going to know. Even if they
Nope.
happen to get lucky, they won't even know that they're right. I think those are some practical things. And I guess I'll end with, it's not a weakness to seek a partner. It's actually a sign of strength. And you should focus on the things that you know that you want to spend your time on. And in the same way you have advisors in other areas of your life, this is an area that can help you identify and accomplish your charitable goals.
Josh, thank you very much for this conversation. I feel like there was a lot of practical tips and ideas and things to think about, not the least of which to have someone help raise your hand if philanthropy is an important part of your family structure and the legacy that you want to create while you are here and leave after you're gone. I feel like there was just a lot of nuggets in this one that a family can start with. So thank you again for this conversation. Always love chatting with you. You have the best vibes, just so you know. So the best
I
energy,
appreciate
like
that.
you can feel it coming through, and I appreciate that. So
I appreciate you saying that. It's been a real, I can't believe the time already flew by. This has been a lot of fun.
Same. Folks, thank you for listening to today's Family Office Success Podcast. If you want to get in touch with Josh, you can find all of his contact information in the show notes or reach out. We're always happy to make the connection. We would love to be of service to help you do that. So thank you again, and we will see you on the next podcast. Thank you for joining me today on the Family Office Success Podcast. I hope you found this conversation insightful and valuable as you navigate the complexities of family office services. If you're looking for more ideas or resources or want to explore how we can support your family office or your family through services and training and strategy, connect with me on LinkedIn or visit our website at whiteriverconsultants.com, and be sure to subscribe to our newsletter for updates and expert insights. And if you're ready to take your family office to the next level, consider joining our mastermind where we can help you manage that chaos and create better outcomes for the families you serve. Until next time, I'm Christi Van Rite, and this has been the Family Office Success Podcast. Take care and keep building for the future.